Well, why don't we go down memory lane? I think it'd be really fun to kind of hear about the early years of the Columbine School of Botanical Studies. Howie, can you take us back to like year one?
Things were different back then.
Mm,
And herbalism was very different back then. You couldn't really go to like a store and buy chamomile tea at like a standard supermarket. So, and organics were kind of very kind of newish and hard to find. Most things. It was a very different time. And in fact, when I first started making tinctures, because I used to sell tinctures, it used to be the Columbines and Wizardry Herbs Inc. And I used to sell tinctures, and my friends would say, "You're not going to experiment with me by having me taste those tinctures." And there was very difficult to sell. There weren't that many people making herbal products, and it only like little herb stores would sell them. It wasn't really a good business to go into. And I also did teaching. And when I started this up, I was giving like a series of classes, which I gave for many years. It eventually turned into the herbal concepts class, but I do these like introductory classes on like calming herbs with nervines, and then another one on astringents, and another one on herbs for the lungs, and herbs alternatives, herbs for colds and flus, that kind of stuff. I give these like and then maybe a class on herbal preparations, like 4 or 6 classes on different kinds of herbs. And I wanted people to come out with me, and I would teach them how to identify and harvest plants, and that would be part of how I would part of the way I could get some herbs to sell, and people would get to keep what they needed. But at first, it was a lot different because I didn't charge money. What I did was I traded people, having them pick herbs for me when we picked, in exchange for teaching them. And that was the first few years I didn't charge any money, and that was really uh didn't really work. It's like ideally, and in my young mind of wanting to give my stuff away for free, what I found is that if I didn't charge money, people didn't show up if it rained or if something else came up. And the first few classes that I ran didn't last that long because the weather would change and people just wouldn't show up. And so then I started charging a little bit of money, and it became better. But it slowly grew. It slowly grew and changed as the years went by. It became longer and longer of a class, and more got added to it. The same as the more I learned also. So I always had these lectures that I was teaching throughout the year, a variety of different things, and I was selling herbs, but I was also doing this field portion, which, like as I said, every year I'd start in like March or April in the beginning of the year, and at first it only lasted a month, and then it lasted a few months, and then it started lasting more and more. Uh, it really got developed way more fully after Stephen got involved. Although when Stephen first got in, it was already pretty developed, if I remember correctly. I don't know. When did you start, Stephen? Like the 90s? Was I teaching by myself at that point?
1994, I think you had a couple teachers you tried to teach. I won't mention any names, but yeah, a gentleman and a woman. Um, the class structure was very much set up, but then we started refining the curriculum. I think at that time we both decided to move from the Gilkey to the Hitchcock. We took that leap, which was a big change in the class, to
Yeah.
move to a more technical key. I think I kind of pushed you to do that, I would say, but yeah, but I think you were going to do it maybe anyway, but we definitely pushed to move the class to more technical botany at the time.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I
but the
remember.
structure was set, to answer your question, the structure was set up, and then we moved into a refinement period when I moved in.
Oh yeah, that was it was really nice having Stephen with us. I remember one of the big decisions I made before Stephen was splitting up the class into a spring and summer session.
mm.
And that worked out really good. That way people could complete the spring session, and if that's all they wanted, they could stop and have completed something and finished what they started, leaving feeling a good feeling. And I had changed the summer at that point, at some point, to being a slightly different class and a different focus. In the spring, we focused mainly on like identifying, locating, tending plants, learning those skills, with a little bit of harvesting. And then in the summer, the switch changed. And we looked at plants from a different angle. That's when we started looking at plants from more how they were used. In the spring, we'd keep a plant list about, what blooming plants we saw based upon the families that they're in botanically. But in the summer, we keep a list of plants, whether they're blooming or not, by their uses. So we have this list of like, food roots, food greens and pot herbs, food fruits, astringents, demulcents, nervines, the calming herbs, that kind of list. So we really changed the focus and made the summer a lot different. And that way it was more likely that people would continue, because it wasn't just more of the same. It became kind of a slightly different class. But when Stephen came in, that was really cool, because him and I started to get together around the campfire when it's just him and I in between classes, and we would do like 3-year plans. And we used to do a lot of 3-year plans, and all our 3-year plans came true. But Stephen really helped me develop a lot of the school as it is now, without question.
Mr. Yeager?
Should I not raise my hand? I don't
No,
know.
you go for it.
Kind of have to interject with yeah.
You can interrupt me, Stephen.
I guess I just wanted to add the reason. Well, the course was split when I first took it. It was April to June, end of June, beginning of April, end of June. A couple weeks break, primarily because we needed to go to Country Fair to sell our tinctures at the Country Fair, and also because the mosquitoes were really bad in the mountains at that time. And Howie had learned that the first few weeks in July, you don't really want to be in the mountains because of the mosquitoes, and it also correlated with Country Fair. And then we'd start the summer, end of July, finish through the beginning of September. But I think what Howie, I just to add to what Howie was saying, what he was saying is that people could take the 4-month spring class, which was 12 field days every week in the woods, and then two lectures. Well, it was 1 lecture in the evening. It turned into 2 lectures in the evening every week, and people could bow out after the first term, because our class was so unique. We would do 3-hour interviews. We do 3-hour interviews for the class, just so they know kind of what they're getting into, because as all of you know, and as you know, Mason, is that you're going in the woods every week, all day, rain or shine, snow, sleet. And so it's very unlike, maybe there's classes now like this, but at the time there was no classes like this, where you would mainly be in the field. And so that was the reason, some of the reasons why Howie would have these 2 terms, is that after those 12 weeks, it was, you may decide that this might not be the right class for you. Even after a 3-hour interview, you might realize that this might not be the class for you. And so you would still get a chunk of curriculum. You'd still have a finality and learn a certain portion of herbal concepts and botany, but you could take a break, come back years later and do the summer, or just that was all you were going to do.
Yeah, it's a little less daunting. It's just there's a little bit less of a commitment. Can help some people make the decision too, I think.